Complete and total mayhem. That's how I would describe the reaction to the story we're going to talk about in this segment. The internet was set ablaze after hearing about a meeting between Mika Brzezinski, Joe Scarborough, the host of Morning Joe, with Donald Trump himself at Mar-a-Lago. What? Of course, the two individuals you're seeing on screen are some of the most outspoken critics of Donald Trump, very often correctly assessing him as such a dangerous, destructive figure. And then they had what Trump described as a very cordial, you could even describe it as friendly, according to, again, Trump's assessment, meeting with Trump where they congratulated him on his victory. They also explained publicly why they did this. I'll play that for you. I want to lay all this out for you, and I'm really curious to hear what all of you think. Was this a good or bad decision on their part? While you're watching this, please do click the subscribe button. We are just 9,000 subscribers away from 1 million subscribers, which is amazing. Thank you so much to each and every one of you. You have nearly done it, and we are so grateful. If you're not yet subscribed, help us get there. We could get there today if all of you who aren't subscribed do today. Very exciting. Here we go.
Over the past week, Joe and I have heard from so many people, from political leaders to regular citizens, deeply dismayed by several of President-elect Trump's cabinet selections, and they are scared. Last Thursday, we expressed our own concerns on this broadcast and even said we would appreciate the opportunity to speak with the president-elect himself. On Friday, we were given the opportunity to do just that. Joe and I went to Mar-a-Lago to meet personally with President-elect Trump. It was the first time we have seen him in 7 years.
Now, we talked about a lot of issues, including abortion, mass deportation, threats of political retribution against political opponents, and media outlets. We talked about that a good bit. And it's going to come as no surprise to anybody who watches this show, has watched it over the past year or over the past decade, that we didn't see eye to eye on a lot of issues, and we told him so.
What we did agree on was to restart communications. My father often spoke with world leaders with whom he and the United States profoundly disagreed. That's a task shared by reporters and commentators alike. We had not spoken to President Trump since March of 2020, other than a personal call Joe made to Trump on the morning after the attempt on his life in Butler, Pennsylvania. In this meeting, President Trump was cheerful, he was upbeat, he seemed interested in finding common ground with Democrats on some of the most divisive issues. And for those asking why we would go speak to the president-elect during such fraught times, especially between us, I guess I would ask back, why wouldn't we? 5 years of political warfare has deeply divided Washington and the country. We have been as clear as we know how in expressing our deep concerns about President Trump's actions and words in the coarsening of public debate. But for nearly 80 million Americans, election denialism, public trials, and January 6th were not as important as the issues that moved them to send Donald Trump back to the White House with their vote. Joe and I realize it's time to do something different, and that starts with not only talking about Donald Trump, but also talking with him.
So that's the one side of the argument that was just outlined there. You also have the other side, which is a big part of the discourse right now, as articulated by the Republicans Against Trump account on X, saying this is why people don't trust the mainstream media anymore. Joe and Mika, who constantly attack fascist Trump on their show, went to Mar-a-Lago to talk with Trump over the weekend. Before I give you my take, one side of the argument being we met with him, we got the opportunity to, and we expressed even where we disagree. We don't walk back what we've said because we met him. And the other side is, in some way, you're normalizing the dangerousness of his views, and you're in action, if not in words, alluding to a backtracking on him being as dangerous as you've correctly identified him to be. Before I give you my take, let's look at what Trump said about this. Mediaite says Trump praises extremely cordial meeting with MSNBC's Joe and Mika. Congratulated me on a great and flawless campaign. That worries me a lot, because if that was the nature of the meeting, it was not a responsible one. If you go there and you kiss Trump's rear end and you give him the ammunition and the PR boost to say, see, even the liberals don't really believe what they say. Very dangerous. But again, hold. I received a call from Joe Scarborough requesting a meeting for him and Mika, and I agreed that it would be a good thing if such a meeting took place. They met at Mar-a-Lago on Friday. Many things were discussed, and I very much appreciated the fact that they wanted to have open communication. In many ways, it's too bad that it wasn't done long ago. And he said that in order to make America great again, it's very important, if not vital, to have a free and fair and open media or press, even though Trump has called the press criminals and said the government should come down hard on MSNBC specifically. CBS should have a license revoked. ABC should have a license revoked. He's not for freedom of the press, but maybe now he's trying to use this meeting as justification to claim that. They congratulated him, according to Trump, on running a great and flawless campaign, one for the history books, which I really believe it was. But it was also a campaign where I worked long and hard, perhaps longer and harder than any presidential candidate in history. So long and hard. We talked about various cabinet members, both announced and to be announced. As expected, they liked some very much. Which ones? But not all. The meeting ended in a very positive manner. We agreed to speak in the future. I expect this will take place with others in the media, even those who have been extremely hostile. But if not treated fairly, however, that will end. And this is where I start getting really uncomfortable, because as I'll explain, it's not at all inherently wrong to meet with a really bad person. It's not. It's about what you use that meeting to do. Just like how when people go, how dare you interview this person or that person? Some people are upset that I'm interviewing Isabella Moody, as we released on the channel. And we have more episodes coming out of that. The interview itself, having someone on a platform by itself, is not what you take issue with or don't. It's how is that opportunity used, responsibly or irresponsibly? The Meet the Press interview with Trump was handled irresponsibly. The Jonathan Swan interview on Axios with Trump was handled responsibly. That's where you have to dive into it, the substance of it, right? And so we'll circle back to that. But when you hear Trump explaining this meeting, it is very uncomfortable to look at what Mika and Joe correctly say about Trump and how dangerous he is and how damaging his ideology is. And how to support these things, it's not that you have this understandable difference in some minor principles. These are foundational principles, or you're misinformed about what Trump stands for and you might have the right principles, but you don't know that you're voting against them. Okay. And to contrast that with what we know about Trump, which is it's only fair and nice and cordial when you're kissing his rear end. And if we got audio, for example, of the meeting and it was just them being super supportive, that would be disgusting, because you shouldn't be two-faced. You shouldn't privately express things about Trump, even to Trump, that don't align with what you actually believe or what you're saying publicly, maybe what you say publicly. In the case where that is found out isn't actually what you believe, which would be terrible. So I understand people's apprehension to applaud this for sure. My take is I want us to be really mindful of when we jump to a denunciation of something like this, because actually one of my goals after the election was to engage in more face-to-face discussions with Trump supporters, because clearly assuming that we can just be over here in a silo, make good points, and the word will get out and people will vote correctly, it didn't work. So I'm gonna be doing a lot of face-to-face oppositional discussions, diving into issues with people who disagree. So I don't want us to just go, the fact they met with him, that's bad. But as we get more information about this, if we feel the meeting was handled irresponsibly, that criticism is totally justified. And if Trump is correct in his characterization of the meeting, it feels like it could have been an irresponsible one. And the big tell, which is why I can't really say for sure how I feel, is how their coverage will change or not change in the coming days. If they are afraid that when Trump says he wants to leverage the government's power to go after MSNBC, that's going to harm them, and they're doing this to cozy up to power, to minimize the potential damage that could be done to them, and that's what this was the beginning of, then all the criticism in the world will be justified. If we see that their coverage changes and they're not actually criticizing him in justifiable ways as they were before. But if they wanted the chance to go in and say to Trump, here's an example of how a meeting like this could have been handled correctly, you're surrounded by only yes men. And so you're being told your mass deportation plan, your plans to enact retribution, your demonization of different people, the enemy from within stuff, your appointments or your nominations, I should say, of these different wacky and terrible people for such important positions in the government. And all that's great. It's going to go over great with the American public. We're here to tell you, we're going to spearhead the effort to sound the alarm so aggressively. If you actually follow through on these things, I promise it's not in your interest to do them, because Trump, you care about PR, you care about all that. You will have such a damaged, tarnished legacy if you actually go through with this, and you'll leave office in shame. That's our view. And then obviously you have to give him a chance to respond. Maybe you plant a seed and he goes, oh gosh, we've heard him say before, yeah, if there's one video of a daughter being ripped away from her mother during these deportation plans, that's going to send the whole plan to the ground, sort of thing, because the whole American public will turn against it. He does think, as unpopular as he is, and he seems okay with that, he does still consider how people will respond to some of these things. And maybe this is your chance to make him afraid of what would happen if he went through on the worst of his authoritarian ambitions. But if you just spent it saying, as Trump quoted them as saying, that he ran a great and flawless campaign, no, that's two-faced, and people should be upset with that. And it does bother me, separate from this instance, maybe this is an example of it, when people are so loud and proud publicly, and then you realize they're just playing a character. They don't actually believe these things. It's one of the things I've been told that people like when they meet me personally, is I'm talking about politics exactly the same and just as much to an annoying degree when I'm not on the show as when I am. But at least y'all know that's because it's an accurate representation of what I believe. And that's what I think makes people so uncomfortable about this particular meeting. But again, if they used it responsibly, and Trump, who never hears solid criticism of him, he's surrounded by people saying you're the best thing ever, and they rattle off a bunch of really strong, compelling points about how it's going to be awful, even for you, if you go through with some of this, maybe that's something that bounces around in his head. And then if they change their tune or change their tune in the coming days and weeks, we'll have a very good indication. The View also discussed this.
As we know around this table, that it is hard to criticize and denounce the abuses of power by Donald Trump when he is president. We have been there before. It means threats. It means death threats. It means retribution against your family. It means crazy things showing up at your house. It means lawsuits. It means all sorts of things. We've done it before, and if we have to do it again, we will do so again. I think there's a lot of people who are probably looking at what Joe and Mika did and find it opportunistic. There are people who change their stripes, or maybe their spots, I should say today, depending on who is in power and what benefits them. I don't know that that's what they are doing. And to me, it's a to-be-determined situation, because right now it's the transition. We don't know what he's going to do as president. We don't know what they're going to do. if he commits abuses of power as president. So, you know, everybody has to live with their decision. Everybody has to look at themselves in the mirror. I'm good.
I absolutely think it was the right decision, and I think it's good that they work on MSNBC. I don't want only Fox people going to see them. That was some of the problem here that I think everyone can agree, maybe even people that voted for Trump can agree, that the things they're watching on Fox are wrong. That's the only network that's had to pay billions of dollars because they got it wrong. So I don't want only Fox people sitting down with him. I want everyone. I don't need to know their motivation. I just know you get nowhere in silence. Conversations had to be had. I also don't believe in, like, we don't platform or we don't do these things. I feel like those are very pie in the sky. If you're not having conversations and winning on ideas, you're not moving anywhere. So to me, this is what the country decided. He's not calling me, but he's not calling me either.
Yeah, I've said it before, that phrase of the country chose this. I don't think she meant it this way, but that definitely, a lot of people are wanting that phrase to mean because Trump won an electoral landslide, but a popular vote, super narrow margin, one of the smallest margins we've seen in modern American history in the popular vote, that means we all just sort of give up and lie down and they can walk all over us. That's just a silly notion. But I totally agree with her. Because this is bringing back the platforming conversation, there's two parts of it I keep trying to separate so that all of you know what I'm saying. Take issue if you believe what happened at the meeting was irresponsible, not with, oh, you can't platform or you can't engage with bad ideologies. No, that doesn't work, clearly. Just, we're watching, ignoring bad ideologies doesn't make them go away. So you clearly have to engage with them responsibly. This is hitting close to home because of some of your criticisms about my conversations with Isabella Moody. And I'm so far from y'all on that. I think that's what we need to do. Bring the ideology out in front of people and then say, look at how it falls down to scrutiny. It fails to defend itself. Show people who might be sympathetic to that ideology that when it's actually grilled and dismantled, it falls apart. That's how we do this. So I actually do not like at all that don't platform thing gets thrown around. It's how are you platforming? And we just need to see what happens in terms of MSNBC coverage in the coming days and weeks. And if that really was just a chance, as was mentioned there by the View host, to make sure Trump's not only hearing from Fox people and he knows what a big portion of the country is thinking, because he's not being told that. So if I had a meeting with him, I could express to him in clear terms, a big portion of the country is going to be really, really angry if you do some of these things. And that's actually good for him to hear. Or was it, you're the best, you ran a flawless campaign, we're actually going to be so much nicer to you, so please don't come after us. And that would be terrible. We'll see. We'll see what comes of it. Let me know what you thought of this in the comments. And get the bonus show if you support this show by clicking the join button below.